Everybody, and welcome to our third lesson on how to write body paragraphs. Today we're going to talk about how to properly integrate evidence into your body paragraphs and how to structure your body paragraphs as you move forward in your drafting. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start overall with just the point of a body paragraph. Why do we include these in an essay in the first place? A strong body paragraph is going to explain, prove, and support your paper's argumentative claim / your thesis statement. And it should have all of the components of a formal paragraph. For example, the paragraphs that you write in social studies or even the ones that you write in science this year. Your body paragraph should start with a subclaim, which is a topic sentence that relates to one of the reasons in your thesis. That's why when I had you draft your thesis statements, we included our reasoning in there because you can pull those reasons into your subclaims or your topic sentences. After you've stated your subclaim, then you lead into your evidence. This is quotes or paraphrases or summaries from our research journal. Remember that our evidence should always be relevant, sufficient, and credible, and we want to make sure that we cite our evidence properly. We'll get to that in a little bit. Then we move into an explanation. This is probably one of the hardest steps in drafting a body paragraph because this is where things start to come from your own brain. An explanation is just rephrasing or summarizing what the evidence that you pulled in the previous step says. So you restate the evidence that you pulled in your own words. And that leads you into your significance. This is where your logos really comes into play, your reasoning, your if-then statements. The significance of your paragraph should be the last sentence of your paragraph or come after your explanation. And it essentially just states what the evidence means in the context of your argument. And we'll get to some examples of this in the future because this can always be a really tricky step when writing your body paragraphs. So let's start at the beginning. Step one, or our topic sentences, or our subclaims. There's many different words that you could use for this. So when we're writing our essays in this class, we are going to focus on just two of the reasons that we provided in our thesis statement. So two of your topic sentences should discuss one of the reasons that you provided in your thesis statement for why your claim is true. One of your topic sentences should also introduce a counterargument. So our first paragraph will be one reason why our claim is true. Our second paragraph will be another reason why our claim is true. And our third paragraph will present a counterargument, but then also loop back to the third reason why our thesis statement is correct or true. But one of these topic sentences will introduce the counterargument and what people would say if they were opposing your argument. So, what should these topic sentences look like? They should encapsulate and organize your paragraph, and they should state why is the paragraph in the context of your argument or thesis statement true. And then also think about how can you pull language from your thesis statement into your subclaims, but avoid being repetitive. So we're going to try and find ways to restate some of the reasons that we gave, but make sure that they're organized to fit the entire paragraph and they're not repetitive. Here are some sample topic sentences that we can look at. Look at these here and decide which one do you think would be the strongest example of a topic sentence or a subclaim. Now we're moving on to how to integrate our evidence. So we have our evidence from our research journal, but now how are you supposed to put that into your writing? This can be a little bit tricky. We're going to look at 3 different ways to integrate your evidence into your body paragraphs. You could first do a direct quote. This is probably what you're most used to. If there's some words from your source that are going to make your evidence stronger by including the direct quote, use that. If you are thinking, there's some evidence, maybe I'm looking at some statistical data that would be really interesting, but I don't really know how to pull a direct quote from that, then you can paraphrase. When you're paraphrasing, this means that you're restating what a source has said rather than quoting the source in their exact words. Again, this is really helpful for if you're pulling statistical data or if you're looking at an infographic, you can paraphrase from that source. And last but not least, we can summarize. Summarizing is when we're reducing a very large amount of work into a shorter form. And unlike paraphrasing, a summary condenses a larger part of a source into a shorter statement. So paraphrasing might still be a little bit longer of evidence that we pull, but a summary will be perhaps even like a sentence that condenses maybe an article or a bunch of statistical data into one statement. And this one's kind of tricky because it's also where you really have to use your writing skills and your analytical brain. So let's look at some examples. If some of the exact words from the text will make your evidence stronger, then you're going to quote those directly. But you really want to make sure to put them in quotation marks, because if you don't do that, then it's technically considered plagiarism. And by the way, we call it a quote because you're quoting someone else's exact words, even if they are written. So you might think of a quote as something a person says out loud and then therefore it gets put into quotation marks, but it works the same way if you're quoting someone else's written words, like from an article they wrote. So let's say that you're trying to convince parents in your argument to cut down on the snacks that they give to their kids, either like before school or after school. And you read a blog post from a dietitian named Sarah Renner, and you find this paragraph. You'd like to use some of this paragraph to support the idea that frequent snacking can be bad for kids, but quoting the whole paragraph would be letting Sarah write your entire essay for you, basically. So instead, you write your own ideas supported with one direct quote from the expert. And as you can see on the screen, I've already chosen the part that will be the most effective in your writing. It starts with, when snacks are available all of the time, kids won't have the chance to work up an appetite for meals, which tend to be more nutritionally balanced. So again, we don't want to quote the entire paragraph because that's basically letting Sarah Renner do our entire essay for us, and then that would be plagiarism. So instead, we're going to take one line that most directly relates to our argument. We've already chosen that line. And here's what it would look like in the context of our body paragraph. Registered dietitian Sarah Renner explains it this way. When snacks are available all the time, kids won't have the chance to work up an appetite for meals. So you can see I took out the part that was in parentheses here, and I just cited the blurb that's going to be most helpful for my argument. And I made sure to include a proper MLA citation for Sarah's work here, so that I'm also not plagiarizing even just this short little quote from her. Next is paraphrasing. So when you're paraphrasing someone else's ideas, again, you're restating what they said rather than quoting their exact words. So let's imagine that we want to paraphrase this same blog post, Sarah Renner's blog post, and we want to paraphrase one of her points rather than quoting her directly. So using the same paragraph, here's how I would paraphrase her. Registered dietitian Sarah Renner points out that snacks are often less healthy and balanced than regular meals, and if kids constantly snack, they never really get hungry for their meals. So this is a way, if we're looking back at the evidence we chose from the last blurb, this is a way to paraphrase that evidence and place it into our paragraph in a way that still makes our argument successful, but doesn't include a direct quote. You can often include more information when you're paraphrasing because you're not limited to the exact words that someone else has said. So again, I know many of us are probably used to including a direct quote, but paraphrasing is a really great tool to have in your back pocket. And I would highly encourage you to use paraphrasing at least twice in your essay, maybe once for each paragraph. Next, and last but not least, we have summarizing. Summarizing is when we reduce a larger amount of work into a shorter form. And unlike paraphrasing, which restates a more specific part of the source, a summary looks at the whole and then breaks it down into one short statement. So if you wanted to add more support for something you've already said in your paragraph, you could add like a quick summary of a study or an infographic or some other source. So let's again take a look at this Sarah Renner blog post essay, right? Here, you'll see that this person that wrote this included an additional summary of a 2000 study, or well, it's 2007, but you know what I mean, a 2007 study. And they probably looked at this entire study, but then cut down the evidence into one brief statement. A 2007 study found that this is true. Teens who are frequent snackers also regularly skip meals. Now, it could be that this source that this person found really had information that was semi-useful to their argument, but this was the kind of bit or piece that they wanted to take from the entire source, and so they condensed it down into this one statement and included it. And so, we'll see, here's my big bright red arrow for you. This is how we would summarize some evidence from a source to include in our essay. So remember that you can do a direct quote, you can paraphrase, or you can summarize evidence that you want to include in your essay and then work it in there. Now comes kind of the tricky part, is including an explanation and significance into your writing. And this, again, is tricky because you have to pull this from your own brain and you have to find the rationalization for why your evidence is useful. And no matter how good your evidence is, it's not going to help your argument very much if your reader doesn't know why you think it's important to your argument. If you're unable to make that logical connection, aka some logos there, you're going to lose your readers and your audience because you're not able to rationalize why you pulled evidence in the first place. That's why we have to make sure that, first of all, our evidence is relevant and credible and sufficient for our argument, but then we have to take it to the next step of explaining why it's significant or why you think it's significant. So our steps within this third step are first to explain what the evidence says in your own words. So we're restating what the evidence is saying. And then we're answering this question. How does this evidence prove the point that you're trying to make? And how does it also relate to your essay or your paper as a whole? This is really how you can step up your argument from maybe like a 6th grade level paper to a 7th grade level paper, is how does your evidence prove your point more specifically, but then also how does it relate to your essay as a whole? If you can connect your first and second paragraphs with your reasoning, you will be golden. So let's take a look at this example here. All right, let's try and practice explanation and significance. So let's say that my subclaim in one of my paragraphs is closing local libraries would negatively impact a sense of community amongst patrons. So let's take a look at these two statements here. Which one do you think would serve as the explanation and which one would serve as the significance? Now, if we put everything all together, we want to make sure that we're weaving those quotes or paraphrases or our summaries into our essay properly, and also making sure that our language works together and we're not just dropping quotes in the middle of a paragraph, right? So if we look at this example here, let's take a moment and try and figure out what this top part is. If you said that was a subclaim, you're correct. Your subclaim is where you're stating one of the 3 main points of your argument. So this person that wrote this included some great transitional language here. This probably was their second paragraph, and they said another reason snacks should be limited, right? So they included a great transition phrase here and then moved into their reasoning. What do you think this second part is? If you said evidence, you're correct. What type of evidence integration would this be? All right, and moving into the third part of this paragraph here, this is our reasoning. So this is our explanation of how our evidence supports our point and then why it's significant to our argument as a whole. In your paragraphs, you're going to be doing this process 2 times. So you're going to pull at least 2 pieces of evidence to support one subclaim and then explain and reason it twice.